computer. Okay. All right. So today's topic is how to handle employment gaps on your resume. Gaps could be anything from a couple of months to a year, longer, things of that nature. I mean, it could be anywhere under the sun. Everybody has gaps. It's not something that is, don't feel like it's just you by yourself or anything like that. Maybe if it will let me go to the next slide. Let's see. There we go. All right. So types of employment gaps, there's a bunch of different types. You could have took time off to look for a new job. You could have took time off because you were laid off. I feel like now with COVID, everybody has some type of gap in their employment, whether they chose to or not. COVID definitely opened up a lot of different things for everybody. Like now there's a lot of virtual interviewing. There is a lot of work from home jobs, things that you just didn't see before. I know personally at Dress for Success, we never worked from home. Everything was in person. That's how we saw our clients. We had in-person workshops, in-person suiting. Obviously, you tried clothes on, things like that. But now it's not like that. Everything's virtual for us. And there's a lot of jobs that are going to be like that. I feel like employers are more understanding now that everybody's kind of had that work from home type thing, especially with kids being in and out of school, doing e-learning. So part of COVID, this is a good thing, I feel personally, but there's other parts that if you just don't have the technology or you're not technology savvy, this might not be a good thing. You could have took time off to be a stay-at-home caregiver or stay-at-home parent. There could have been a medical leave for whatever reason that it may have been. You could have furthered your education and you didn't have to work while you were doing that. Got certifications or licenses depending on what field you're looking into or what field you are in. You also could have relocated and it could have took you a little bit to find a job there, or maybe you wanted to get your feet on the ground and you didn't need to get a job right away, but now you wanted to. So it's kind of all kinds of things that could be a gap in your employment. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or it's good or anything like that. Everybody has them. Ways to kind of shorten the employment gaps or make them less obvious on your resume. You could, if it's in the same year, you could use years instead of months and years. So if you're doing your resume and you had a gap from last year from like May to October, you could just put that your previous job, you were there from 2020 to 2020. I personally know as a recruiter, I'm going to ask you about those months though. I want to know, like, how long were you at that job? Was it a month? Was it the full year? Was it 6 months? Things like that. So yes, that is an option, and maybe people won't ask you at all. Maybe they will, but just know that if they do ask you, that is a time to kind of open up that door and talk about those gaps. But that is an option. It's not necessarily wrong. Don't feel like you have to put the month and the year on your resume. But coming from a recruiter standpoint, I know that I like that. I like seeing the month and year. There's a big difference between you working 2 months in 2020 and you working the whole year in 2020. There's different formats that you could use with resumes as well. I'm sure if you're looking to do a resume and you Google how to do a resume, you're seeing all kinds of formats for your typical resume with the dates and formats, things like that. And then your functional resume, I mean, you got to use what works for you. I don't think it's a bad idea to have maybe 2 resumes kind of circulating out there, different setup, different things, and you can tailor them to what you're looking for to be specific. On the other resume, you could maybe not highlight your dates, maybe don't bold them, make them stand out. You could use smaller font, things like that. So yes, you still have the dates on there, but you're not bolding them. You're not making them stand out. You're not putting them in bigger font or anything like that. You're just making sure that someone's eyes aren't drawn to those dates if you are trying to avoid that. You also, I've seen it in the past as well, people have included other experiences that they've gained during their gap. So for an example, when I was recruiting for Anthem, I saw one woman, she put on there that she didn't work from, I think it was like 2014 to 2016. And she put in there that she was a caregiver for her mom who was sick. So she put that down basically kind of as a job. But that let me know as a recruiter before I even called her, this is what she had going on. This is why she had a gap. And it was helpful. She didn't go into a lot of detail, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that you don't want to go into a lot of detail. You want to address it, but keep it short as well. Some examples for formatting or using years on your resume. This kind of goes about if it's in a single calendar year. Obviously, like we talked about, if you're using 2020 to 2020, it's easier to do that. versus 2020 to 2021. So on the left, you'll see that on a typical resume, it says store manager at the Gap. They worked there from October 2018 to August 2020. On the right-hand side is the way to do it without the years, where you're still a store manager at the Gap, but you're putting 2018 to 2020. I would suggest if you're going to not use the months, just make sure that you're keeping that consistent all the way down your resume. Don't just do it for your Gap, or don't just do it for your most recent job. Keep it consistent all the way down. This person in this example, you can definitely tell they were at this job for longer than 3, 4, 5, 6 months, because it's 2018 to 2020 or 2015 to 2018. If you have something like that, they're probably not going to ask you for the months. They don't care, because they can clearly tell that you've been there for longer than a year or 6 months or anything like that. So if the rest of your history is like that, I really think that you'll get away with not using the months. I don't think that they'll question it too much. There's also a way that you could put in your cover letter a few sentences, maybe explaining your gap, kind of at the top of your cover letter, just addressing that right away so they know. I am a firm believer of not doing a cover letter unless they ask you for one, just because a lot of times recruiters are busy. They're getting 2, 3, 4, 500 applicants in at a time. To be honest with you, they're not going to read your cover letter, and you've just kind of spent time or wasted time doing that and tailoring it to that company, tailoring it to someone specific. You're more than welcome to do the cover letter if you want. I'm not saying that's wrong or right. I'm just saying I wouldn't waste the time if they're not asking for one, because they're probably not going to read it. But some examples of this, the top one says, after a successful 9-year career in computer programming at whatever company they were at, I took a maternity leave, and then I completed my bachelor's degree in business management. During this period, I have been preparing for the next steps in my career development by developing the exact set of skills that your company is presently seeking. So simple, to the point, nothing that you have to really elaborate on. Just make sure that you're keeping it simple and to the point. If you don't feel comfortable addressing it in your cover letter, you don't have to, or if you're not writing a cover letter, you don't have to do that. But be prepared to talk about why you had that gap and what it was, but keep it brief. If you had an illness or you had a medical leave because you were taking care of someone, you can address that as well. I would just end that with letting them know that this is no longer an issue going forward and you're ready to get back into the workforce. Employers like if you're honest and upfront. If they feel like you're kind of giving them the runaround or you're not telling the full story, they're going to be really apprehensive to kind of take that chance on you and hire you, because they feel like you're leaving something out, and there's a reason for that. So again, you don't have to go into full detail about, oh, I was on medical leave because of X, Y, and Z, but just make sure that you're keeping it brief, but you are being honest and upfront about everything. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay, perfect. I got some chats up here. Let me see what we got going on. All right. So Kim said, I typically don't include volunteering or part-time jobs that aren't relevant to positions applied for, but be prepared to explain them in the interview. Is that a better place for those on the resume? At the bottom of your resume, I wouldn't put volunteering at the top or anything like that, but you could add it at the bottom. If you have education on there, you could put it under education, you could put volunteering. Some companies, especially some that we work with, like Charles Schwab, Salesforce, they really, really like volunteering. So even if you don't feel that it pertains to the company you're applying for, the position you're applying for, they like to see that. Charles Schwab actually gives their employees time. They pay them to volunteer essentially. So I know that they like to hire people that like to do that volunteering experience as well, because they know that you're going to continue to do that. So you don't have to add it if you don't want to, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting it on there. But again, I would put it at the bottom, just that, volunteering, and then wherever you were at, do it just like you would your jobs though, the most relevant at the top, and so on and so forth. Maybe if you volunteered someplace and it's been 5, 6, 7 years and you haven't done that anymore, you don't have to put that one on there. You could just put the most recent if you want. So don't feel like you have to put every volunteer opportunity on there. But I like seeing that on there. And I know that other employers do as well, especially ones that their company values that. It just makes it easier to make the decision to hire you, because you have that and we want someone that's going to do that. Part-time jobs, totally up to you. I put them on there just because if you don't, I feel like it kind of presents a gap a little bit of what you were doing if you only did part-time jobs, unless you're working a full-time job and a part-time job. In parentheses though, next to the job, I do put part-time, or I do, or what, seasonal, if that's another thing that you may have been doing as well, just so they know. Up to you though, if you want to put that on there. You know what the position's looking for. You read that job description and things of that nature. So if you feel like it doesn't pertain and it's going to make your resume longer, then you can leave that off. But if you already have a short resume, I don't think it would hurt to put it on there. You can put part-time in parentheses next to it, just in case they do have any questions. They can address that with you or bring that up with you. But I don't think it matters either way, whether you're part-time, full-time. It's a job's a job at that point. And then Christine, what if you've only worked part-time jobs? My reason is due to parenting. Christine, that's completely fine. You don't even have to put in parentheses that you work part-time or that you work full-time. If you want to stress that, you can. I think on my resume, I've had a couple of seasonal jobs when I was in college. So I did put next to those seasonal, just because obviously, you know, if it's seasonal, summer's very short. So it'd have been May to August or May to September. So I would put on there seasonal so they know that I didn't just up and quit, or I didn't get fired. It was a seasonal position that did end. But it doesn't matter if you're working part-time or full-time. They just like to see that longevity. They like to see that you are working, whether it's part-time or full-time. But again, if you feel like you want to put on there part-time for some positions, like Kim asked, you're more than welcome to do that. But in your case, Christine, since you have all part-time positions, I wouldn't worry about putting part-time in parentheses for those. I assume whatever job you're looking for now, or you will be looking for, is going to be another part-time job. So there's no need to explain why you only want part-time. Let's see, is that it for the questions? I think that's it so far. Okay, great response. Thank you. All right, so the do's and don'ts for the gaps in your employment. Oh, we have someone who wanted to join. Do be honest about the gaps. They're going to come up eventually, whether they're doing a background check or not. I cannot tell you how many times in recruiting somebody would leave something out or not say something, and then when I would do the background check, it would come up and I'd have to talk to them about it. And then 8 times out of 10, I would say it ended up being that I weren't able to hire them or go through with the offer letter, because if they left something out that is crucial to them getting hired or not getting hired. When you're filling out your application for a position, just make sure that the jobs that you're putting on that application match the jobs that you have on your resume that you're using to apply for that job. Because when they run your background, they're going to do it off your application, and that needs to match what your resume is. If for whatever reason on your resume you have, you know, that you worked at the Gap, but you didn't put that on the application, maybe not as big of a deal if it was the other way around. If you put on the application that you worked at the Gap, but that's nowhere on your resume, they're going to talk to you about that. It takes the background a little bit longer to come back when things aren't cohesive like that and they match up. So just make sure that you're putting both. The only time that I would say not to put jobs that match your resume in your application is if a specific application asks you to only go back 5 years or only go back to the last 3 years, then you do only need to do what it's asking you to do. But again, if you're only going back 5 years, make sure those jobs during that 5 years matches what's on your resume during that 5 years. You just don't need something coming up in the background check and it hindering you from getting this job, or hindering the time frame of it going through because they had to communicate to you and figure out what's going on. Be brief. Don't apologize for the employment in your Gap. Just talk about it, own it, and move on. Whether that's your parenting, you had medical issues, you took care of someone, whatever it may be, just own it, but keep it brief. You don't need to go into details about what those medical issues were, or, you know, that the person you were taking care of has passed away. You don't need to do any of that. Just own it, move on, and still like let them know that this will not be a problem going forward. You know, you're ready to work, you're ready to get back into it. Everything's been rectified. Be proactive. Show how the gaps add to your skill set. So if you had a gap off because you were going to school, or in Christine's case, she's parenting as well, doing these workshops, this is a way that that's adding to your skill set. So just because you're not working or just because you're working part-time doesn't mean that you're not doing things to better your professional development, like these workshops or doing things with Passport to Employment. Not saying that you have to write that on your resume, but you definitely can bring that up in the interview that, hey, while I was not working during this time, I did take, this course at Passport to Employment, or I did take this course with Dress for Success. It was an 8-week financial literacy course, or whatever it may be, just letting them know that you weren't just sitting at home doing nothing. You were still being proactive and bettering yourself, whether that's a financial literacy class or an employment class, whatever it may have been. Give the real reason for the job gap on your resume. Again, don't just, I just needed some time off, or, be upfront. If there's anything that deals with maybe incarceration or anything like that, that's going to come out in the background check anyway. Again, you do not have to tell them, oh, I was incarcerated because of X, Y, and Z, or this is how much time I had, or anything like that. Just tell them, I was incarcerated, I'm out now, and this is what I've taken from that. If that's not your reasoning, you weren't incarcerated, you just have that gap on your resume for whatever reason. Again, just give the real reason, be upfront, but keep it brief. Don't go into specific details. You don't need to tell them which family member was sick or whatever may have been going on. Just keep it brief, but own it. And then again, assure the employers the resume gap will not be a reoccurring or not something that you're still dealing with. At the end of the day, it's up to them if they want to believe you or not. But I feel like the more confident and the more times you practice this and have it down to a T, the better they're going to be when they are hearing you and they're going to believe what you're saying. If you're kind of stuttering over it, or you're stumbling or taking a while to answer this question because you haven't practiced it, or you don't have what you want to say in order, I feel like it's not going to be as believable as would if you're going to practice. This is what my gap is. This is why I had it, and this is going forward what I'm going to do. So I definitely would say if you have any gaps, make sure that you are practicing how you're going to address those, what you're going to say. Practice makes perfect. The more you practice it, the more you can say it. If you can do it with yourself in a mirror, that will definitely help get you confident and ready to talk to them about that. And then lastly, show relevant experience after the gap if possible. If you have anything, like you took any courses or did any certifications, anything like that, and you could put that on there, just like the volunteer experience, it would go at the bottom, and you could put whatever the title may be, depending on what you took. If you did take some type of class or training, you could put that on there. If you don't want to put that on there, you don't have to. You just want to bring it up in the resume or in the interview, you're more than welcome to do that. Totally up to you what you feel comfortable doing. Most employers or most recruiters, when they are looking at your resume and things like that, to be honest with you, they're looking at your longevity in your job history. They're not reading all the way down to other things. Like they're going to bring that up in the interview when they talk to you about that. But in the initial scan of your resume, they are looking, okay, does this person have longevity? Do they match what we're looking for? Have they done this job in the past? Perfect. Let me bring them in. I'll learn more about Kim later, or I'll learn more about Beverly later. That's when they can study your resume a little bit more and sit down and figure out, okay, tell me more about the time you volunteered at Dress for Success, or tell me more about this 8-week financial literacy class that you did while you were unemployed, things like that. And then some of the don'ts for covering up your gaps or hiding them. Try not to hide it or cover it up. Again, it's going to come out in the end, so it's just easier if you're upfront about it. Don't overshare. Keep the explanation simple. And then don't lie or embellish anything or dates. Don't try to say that you were someplace longer than you were or things like that. When they do those background checks or they have somebody that's calling to verify those things, they're going to find out. And you don't want to give them any reason that you lied or embellished something, and they cannot hire you anymore because of that. Don't worry about gaps in your resume that's shorter than 6 months, especially now with COVID happening. I feel like employers are going to be so much more understanding, or they are so much more understanding because of these gaps, because they probably had to let people go too, or probably had to make business decisions that help them as well. So definitely don't worry about any of that. Everybody has gaps, whether it's a month, 2 months, 6 months, a long period of time, for whatever reason, everybody has them. And then don't let your gap psych you out. It's more normal than you think. Don't feel like because, oh, I took time off and I raised my kids for 10 years, and that's completely normal. People do that all the time. There's plenty of things that you learned while you were raising your kids as far as budgeting, time management. You were getting them to and from things, I'm sure. I mean, there's plenty of skills that you gained from that you can put on your resume or that you can talk about. Even though you weren't working, you still say it. Being a stay-at-home mom or being a stay-at-home parent is very, very much like a job. I'm sure we all know that. Let me see what the chat say. How far back should you include with your job history to avoid? So coming from a recruiter standpoint, I would say not to go back more than 10 years on your resume. If you're somebody who has worked for a staffing company or a temp service and you had a job here for 2 weeks, you had a job there for a month, things like that, you can pick and choose what you want to put on there. You don't need to put on every single job that you did during that temp assignment. If you are going to put on there, I was at Amazon for a month, I was at FedEx for 2 months, I was here, blah, blah, blah. And it is because you were a temp worker or you were with a staffing company, make sure that you're putting on there the staffing company that you worked for and that you were a temp to hire. Just so they see that you were not job hopping around. It was part of your contract with that company that you were temp to hire. They moved you around where they needed you. Again, it's up to you how many jobs you do want to put on there. I would say from a recruiter standpoint, don't go back further than 10 years. Some applications that you fill out will tell you not to go back farther than 5 years. Or I know FedEx, for example, 7 years. Whatever that application's telling you to do, follow that guideline for them. That's an easy way to weed somebody out. If I tell you I want the last 5 years of your job history and you give me the last 10 years, okay, you can't follow directions, let me move on to the next person. And then Beverly also asked, how may I donate clothing or shoes to Dress for Success? We have a partnership with Classic Cleaners. Any Classic Cleaners around Indianapolis will take items to donate to us. They don't clean them unless if you're donating, you pay for them to clean them. They don't clean them, but they do collect stuff for us. And then they, once a month, they go around with their truck and pick up all the donations from Classic Cleaners and bring them down to us. We aren't accepting donations right now at our boutique yet. I'm assuming that's going to open back up within the next month or so. But you can also check out our website and that will give you more information about what we collect, our donation times, drop-offs, things like that. So if you want to wait to come to the boutique to donate, you're more than welcome to check that out on the website. It used to be 2 or 3 times a week. I'm not sure when we go back into accepting donations what that's going to look like, if it's going to be, 1 time a week, a couple times, or how that'll look. But Kim says, my challenge is that much of my top sales numbers are old, more than 10 years old. How should you cover that old experience on a resume if relevant to the position you are applying for? So for that, you can, if it's relevant to the position you're applying for, Kim, do you mind me asking, and you don't have to answer, have you recently been working and you're just trying to get back into sales, or have you not been working?
Well, actually, I quit my job 8 years ago to start a children's yoga business. And then when COVID hit, it made it difficult to keep that business going. So I closed it about a year ago. So right now, I'm not working currently, just doing some volunteer work and kind of deciding on, do I want to go back into sales or do I want to pivot into something else? And again, the problem with the sales is that now those numbers that I had, because I haven't worked in direct sales in 8 years now, are old. So, but then, if I say that I had this President's Club award and then they don't see it on my resume, they'll be like, I do have an actual portfolio that I show people in a live interview. Mm-hmm. But since we have so many Zoom interviews, the last year, I haven't had any in-person interviews. So it's hard to, prove that unless you put it on your resume. But I also am worried about the ageism thing because anything over 10 years, I know that looks dated. But I want to make sure that they understand, that builds on the experience that I've had. One person suggested I just put at the bottom of the resume, put other professional experience and then don't even list the dates, but just where you worked and what your position was. And she said that way you could kind of explain, oh, I was the, top sales winner at the company I previously worked for, you know,
Yep.
so
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say to do as well, to get to offset that ageism.
yeah,
I like that idea a lot, just because you're not putting dates, because as soon as somebody sees, you know, oh, 2001 or something, they're immediately going to think, oh, well, heck,
yeah,
you know. So I definitely like that idea. I would also say, and that's nice to put it like that, because then it makes me want to pull you in for an interview to know more about that. Like,
mhm,
why is it down here at the bottom? How long ago was it? Things like that. The point of your resume is to get me to want to interview you, to find out more. So if you're
mhm,
putting it all out there and I don't like what I see, I'm not going to bring you in, because it's all out there.
right,
But you doing what you just said, that intrigues me. That makes me, okay, let's bring her in and talk more about that. Like,
yeah,
how long ago were these sales? What was this? What was that? Because I feel like even though those numbers are old, sales is sales. And
exactly. I mean, exactly. That's kind of how I position it in an interview.
yep,
You know, the same person that had those results is sitting across from you right now, and I even have experienced more, you know, built more experience in the last few years too, in another position. So that was kind of a struggle for me, because I thought, well, you know, I have to put it on there. If I don't put it on there, that's the big chunk of my. I worked for the same company for
sure.
10 years, so it showed promotions, it showed lots of sales numbers, it showed a steady stream of progress. And when you work for yourself, I didn't have those sales numbers. I could say how many customers I had, but you know, teaching yoga is a whole different ball game, you know, than having a corporate job.
Yeah. And I think also, I'm assuming on your resume, you're going to put on there the business that you own and how, what you were doing for that. And as soon as people start talking to you and you say, you know, I closed it because of COVID, they're immediately going to understand. Everybody was impacted by COVID. It's not just something here in Indiana or here in Indianapolis. Everybody's business took a hit, whether it was I had to close down or whatever it may have been. So that definitely is in your favor as well. But yeah, I like the idea of putting it at the bottom and talking about that, because with sales, sales is sales. You can still sell today just like you could 8 years ago. Your technique might have to be a little different because we are virtual, like you said,
Right.
versus being in person with your, yeah.
Mhm.
But it's not like it's a computer thing where, you know, 10 years ago I was a computer programmer. I can still do that
Right.
today. Times have changed so much. It doesn't matter what you did 10 years ago with computers. It's so different now. But with sales, sales is sales. Like it's
Yes.
you can still sell today. You just got to change your technique, because
Yeah.
now everything's virtual. It's not, you're not going in person to do that. You're not going door to door or whatever it may have
Mhm.
been.
Yeah.
So yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. I definitely agree with whoever told you that. That is what I would suggest as well.
Okay.
At the bottom, that intrigues me. That makes me want to pull you in and learn more about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, I think that might be the last slide. I know this is short. It was 7 slides. Just doing the research to talk about this topic, there's just not a lot out there to figure out how to address gaps. The biggest takeaways I would say from this is just to be upfront and honest about it. Don't try to lie or embellish any of your dates. Keep it short and brief though. Don't go into a bunch of details of, oh, I had a medical leave because of X, Y, and Z, and then this happened, and then that happened. um, you don't even have to tell them what your medical leave was for. You don't have to say it was cancer or my husband was sick or whatever. Just I had a medical leave, things are taken care of, I'm ready to get back into the workforce. Um, Same thing with incarceration. If that happens to be somebody's reason, you don't need to tell them any of that. That's going to come up on the background anyway. If they're running the background, they're going to need to know that. But be honest and upfront about it. If you think that something on your background's been expunged, I would still write that down. I can't tell you how many times as a recruiter somebody didn't write a charge down because they thought it was expunged and it still came up, and I wasn't able to offer them the job because they lied on their background check, even though they didn't intentionally do that. So yeah, that's what I would say. Does anybody have any questions or anything like that? I know this was short and sweet. It was just very hard to find information to present other than the stuff that we kind of came up with. What is your suggestion? Should I get a bridge job while looking? I don't think it will take this long to get a full-time job. I don't think it hurts to get a bridge job while looking. I think that helps your case. Once you get a job, I feel like it's easier to find another job versus not having a job at all and looking for a job.
Mhm.
It seems like once you find a job, then all of a sudden all these other people are interested in you as well. And they're wanting to interview you and things like that. The bridge job, if you get that and you don't feel like putting on your resume, you don't have to. I think it would look good on your resume because you're not just sitting around doing nothing at home. You are still working. It might not be the job you want or the position that you want or the pay that you want, but some money's better than no money, and people are going to see that. I would be more apt to hire someone who did take a bridge job versus someone who, well, I didn't take this job at McDonald's because I don't want to work at McDonald's. Okay, well, if you need money, you'll do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So definitely, I would definitely take a job in between if you can. Doesn't have to be your be all end all job, but anything right now is better than nothing. And that gets you more experience. That gets you some dates on your resume and things like that. It helps kind of bridge that gap that you have now.
Even if it's not related to what you ultimately want as a full-time job.
Yeah, I would definitely totally fine with that. If you put that on your resume and it's not related to what you want as your full-time job, you'll be able to explain that or talk about that hey, I took this job in the meantime, just I needed to take something. And people will understand that, especially now with COVID. Times are hard. People are doing all kinds of stuff that they typically wouldn't have done
Okay.
before. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions or anything specifically related to them that maybe they want to talk about or ask about? I'm going to stop sharing because it makes it easier. Okay. So yeah, I will send out the PowerPoint to everybody. I'll send it to the email that you use to register for this class on. The only person I think, I'm not sure, there's a S Blackburn on. I'm not sure who that is, and I don't know who to send it to. So if you want to chat me your first and last name or your last name or whatever you want to chat me with, just so I know who to send it to. Everybody else, I'm pretty sure I know who's who and who to send it to. But I'll send that. The recording I'll get put up on YouTube and our website in a little bit. Let's see what else. Is there any questions anybody has? I try not to talk super fast. I know that. I feel like I did though. Oh, thank you, Beverly. Perfect. Well, I will share all that. Our next workshop is coming up on May 19th. You guys are more than welcome to look at that and sign up for it if you're interested in that. Everything's on our website. We have another workshop coming up in June as well. It's the first Wednesday of June, and that topic is going to be staffing agencies. So I have somebody from the staffing world that's going to be on, and she's just going to kind of give backgrounds about staffing companies and answer any questions that anybody may have. I know before I dealt with staffing companies, my mindset was kind of, oh, it's a temp job. I don't want a temp job. I don't want to mess with them. But staffing companies are way more than that. And if you are unfamiliar with them or if you have questions, I would definitely kind of get on for that call. It'll be at 11 o'clock in the morning again on that first Wednesday in June. Let me get the date, and I can include that in the email as well. June 2nd. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today, and thanks for asking a bunch of questions and the feedback. I really appreciate it. I will start getting the email together and I'll send that here shortly.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.